everyone to today's regular weekly Blab now. It's our second one, talking about how to improve homeless services through psychologically informed environments, which are also known as PIEs. So it's really exciting to be kind of experimenting with this new technology, Blab. I'll just very briefly, for those who are new to it, explain that if you like what someone's saying, I want to give them a bit of positive feedback, you can tap on the screen. So I'm just tapping on Robin's screen there, and some what they call props come up, little hand things that go, thank you. And Hosting Network 2 has been doing that. So they're called giving props. You can also ask questions if you want, or comment in the comments box. So Hosting Network 2 has asked a question, which we'll answer in a second, which is, what is the psychology? Can you explain it to us, the psychological bit of PIE? I just wanted to say I'm Ray Middleton from Fulfilling Lives in Newcastle and Gateshead, and we work with 100 people with multiple complex needs across Newcastle and Gateshead. But we've also got this role of changing the system, and there's 12 Fulfilling Lives projects across England. And Robin, do you want to just introduce yourself?
Right, okay, yes, I am Robin. Let me think. I was a psychiatric social worker for a large part of my career, up until about sort of 10 or so years ago, when I started getting interested in housing and homelessness. And ever since then, increasingly, I've focused on the kind of mental health issues that you find in the homelessness population, and also the kind of things we can do about it once you start thinking of that as a mental health issue, rather than just as a sort of providing shelter or welfare rights, advice and so on. When I suppose, in a way, I'm starting to answer part of the question about psychologically. You start thinking in terms of, hold on, have these people had an awful lot of negative, hostile experiences in their past? How do we need to address those issues? Then you're starting thinking psychologically. We can go into a lot more detail about some specific bits of psychology that are really useful if you want, but that's at least one way of approaching the answer.
Thanks, Robin. And last time, what we're hoping for here is to create a community of people over time who are interested in coming onto live TV, even if it's to watch or to comment, and to share ideas around how to improve homeless services through PIE. And how to change the system is one of the other tasks that we've got here at Fulfilling Lives. Just to say, give a shout out to Westminster Council and Victoria are launching the PIE guidance on Monday, and there's an event about that, but that's some really good guidance, and we can get a link to that guidance to people. I think last week we had a great chat with Jamie, who came in running a homeless service in Bristol, and I emailed him the stuff later, which was great to connect with him. So we're trying to, as well as the chat we have today, it'll get recorded and people can see the recording, but we're also building up a community of people who want to develop services and change the system in that way. So it's worth bearing that in mind, that guidance is coming out on Monday. And it'd be good, maybe, Robin, to have a future Blab in a couple of weeks' time with maybe invite Claire Ritchie, who wrote it, and Victoria from Westminster City Council Commissioner on to talk about the content of that, because it's a really good document.
It is. Claire's an old friend and colleague of mine, and the way she approached producing the guidance was partly based on some work that I and a few other colleagues had done a couple of years or so ago, a couple of guidance documents that were published. But she then produced a first draft, passed it round a lot of other people to comment on. So it's been very much a sort of consensus building approach. One or two issues that weren't all that clear that we tried to clarify, thinking it through in the course of trying to write it. So yeah, it's a really, really nice piece of work, and it's very much a kind of collaborative effort.
Great. So let's have a Blab and invite them on in a couple of weeks, maybe give them time to get onto the new technology. And the other thought I had was maybe about a future Blab is we could invite people from all the Fulfilling Lives programs, because they're looking at this client group, and maybe have a Blab around system change and around what they think about changing the system and what they're experiencing around people with complex needs, homelessness in their part of the England, as it were. So do you think that might be a good topic?
Ray, you might need to explain what we mean by system change, because although you and I and one or two others are familiar with it, incidentally, folks, there's a really lovely interview videoed interview that I did with Ray and one of his colleagues, Alex, who's here, that goes into this for, sort of 15, 20 minutes, no, about 15 minutes or so of discussion. But just quickly, just to say what you mean by system change and system brokering.
Yeah, so very briefly, because we can post the link up to the in the comments to the YouTube video, but it's there's lots of different services out there. So, for example, mental health and addiction services, homeless and housing services, and there's offending services like probation, we call it in England, and other services, the voluntary sector. And often there are difficulties supporting people with more than one set of problems. So if you've got mental health problems and addiction and you're homeless, the services that are out there intend to do well, want to do well, but the way they're set up often creates difficulties. So those people don't recover and get well systematically and quickly because they fall through gaps in the system, or the way they don't link together very well. And so system change is a general idea. There's lots of different theories about it as well, but about how can you change the system of commission services and voluntary sector to be more integrated, to work better together, to be more holistic and engaged with the clients. And the views and opinions are many around that. So it's not that anyone has the right answer, or there's one right answer, but it's more around bringing people together to explore and exchange ideas around how to change the system for the better within the restraints of commissioning and resources and tasks that different parts of the system and services may have, for the benefit of people who may be homeless, may have those kinds of problems. So in a nutshell, that's what system change is around. And as system brokers, Alex, Richie and myself here in Newcastle, we try to engage. Like tomorrow we bring in managers from all those different systems together for our operational meeting, where we'll talk about dual diagnosis, about the problem of difficulties when people have alcohol and drug problems along with mental health problems, and they often don't particularly do well with the system, doesn't do well at reaching out to them. So we're trying to get them together to see it from each other's points of view, appreciate the restraints and the difficulties and the different kind of philosophies that there are in services. I don't want to ramble too much, but that was a brief answer to that system change.
It needed spelling out a bit.
Okay. Yep.
I'm just thinking, as the Twitter feed sort of scroll stuff at the top of the page, I just want to catch one of the questions before it disappears out of sight. How can a psychologically informed environment help homelessness services? A quick answer, like all of these answers, you can unpick and unpack, and you can go into much more depth depending on what particular bit interests you. But the simplest answer, I would say, is what the psychologically informed environment concept aims to do to help is to describe them. The term PI arose as an attempt to describe what was happening in a lot of homelessness services that we knew of, that no one was really talking about. Nobody had a language even to say, look, this is actually community mental health work with people that most mental health services don't reach, don't touch, can't engage with. It's the people who've dropped through those nets that we're ending up in homelessness. So the idea of a psychologically informed environment was an attempt to say what's actually going on here that isn't being recognized. And when I say recognized, on the one hand, I mean, if you don't recognize what you're doing, you can't expect to do it very well. The more you can actually start calling a spade, the more you can start using it as a spade. So attempting to describe what was going on was an attempt to help people actually do it better. But it was also, and also to unpick different aspects of it that you might want to focus on. So it's, underneath the PI concept, you've got several different elements that we can go into. But the other aspect of recognizing what homelessness services are actually doing, what the best of homelessness was to get better and proper recognition for some absolutely brilliant work that was being done and that wasn't being recognized. So partly it's for services themselves to recognize more clearly what it is they're doing so they can focus on those things and kind of do it better. But it was much more to get recognition for a lot of the work that homelessness services were often seen as kind of scruffy and unprofessional, and they weren't doing anything very sophisticated. it was just a bed for the night, you know, like anybody could do that kind of thing.
Mm.
And that wasn't true at all.
Yeah.
A lot of the work we were seeing, it was
Mm-hmm.
really not properly given the recognition it deserved. So that word "recognise," even that one word has two different, you know, goes into two very different directions.
So
that'd be my answer.
Yeah, and I think what you're saying there is Pi has enabled a kind of relatively stable set of ideas to emerge that people can then talk about around collecting the best practice that in many really good and progressive homeless services was going on anyway. So it gives some validation to the really tough work that the frontline workers are doing there, and some really innovative stuff around reflecting and thinking about the clients and the work they're doing in a psychological way. So, for example, being trauma informed and being mindful of the fact that many of the clients have had above average amounts of trauma and maybe had less than the average amount of skills to deal with that trauma in their early childhood. So there are other things as well, but it helps people to hold those things in mind. So I think the 5 things that come to mind when I think about how Pi helps to crystallize and have a discussion with other services around it is that it concentrates on relationships. It looks at staff support and training, and the support being about reflective practice as a team, about what you're doing, the emotional wear and tear, and how you see the client and ways to engage them. It thinks about the physical environment and how conductive that is to help the staff to reflect, and does it help that to happen? It introduces a psychological framework of some kind, which isn't prescriptive. It could be psychodynamic, CBT, it could be different kinds of frameworks. And then it looks at evidence generating practice. So how, as a service, wherever you are, whether you're really struggling as a service, which is not uncommon, or whether you're doing really good practice or you're somewhere in the middle, how can you go on that journey? And it allows you to have 5 things to think about and to think, well, we might be good at one of them, but we've never heard of the 4th one, and have a discussion with others to say, well, is there anyone out there? And this is what I hope the Blab could do as well, is being able to share ideas about, well, who's used the framework? What have you used? Or how do you kind of change your environment?
So I'm just laughing at Alex's comment there. How do we get them hooked? Hooked, I hope, in the sense of fish on a line rather than hooked in the sense of addicted. Can I just double back? I mean, it's really interesting having this kind of Twitter feed coming in, because it means that there's something. Hosting Network 2 says, can you let me know when you're going to ask a question? I'm going to have a bath, but you can let me know. Hosting Network 2, I'm not quite sure how to answer that.
Well, the good news is we
I'll come back next week, because we'll be doing these as a regular thing through November, December. So, you know.
And we're recording them. And I think one of the things we can do is, as we get better, because we're on a learning curve here about hosting this and sharing ideas and kind of role modeling that it's an exciting new technology that we could use around lots of bits of system change, could bring ideas and people around the country together. But also, as we learn, we can listen to some of the comments. And if we miss them in the Blab discussion, we can answer them the week after, possibly. And we can, you know, like we put a couple of ideas out there around maybe the topic of the Westminster Pi guidance and about bringing fulfilling life people together. And as it goes on, we can respond to the questions and adapt what we do. So Alex has asked here, are commissioners of homeless services committed to Pi? So I wonder, that's a good question, because you've probably got a better overview of this, Robin, nationally than I have. What do you think the view of commissioners would be in terms of Pi?
I think commissioners vary as a bunch, and the same way the areas vary enormously in terms of what their focus is. Some commissioners are very clearly enthusiastic about this whole thing and really getting behind it. There are 2 or 3 parts of the country I would probably suggest are further ahead than many others. Quite a few commissioners, I think, are so busy with so much they've got to deal with that if it looks like a good idea, they'll just say, yeah, okay, we'll do that, without necessarily really getting to grips with what it actually means and putting much behind it. So there's a kind of informed commitment, and there's a sort of not very informed commitment. I'm sure there are some parts of certainly of the UK where they've never heard of it.
Yep.
You know, it's still very much a kind of, you know, it's led from the ground up.
Yep.
That's how it began. I think that's really, really important. I'm quite happy with that. In other words, I'm quite happy in a way with it being patchy because we can all learn different things. I think what's tending to happen is that in some areas, the commissioners are getting the idea and they're talking with the providers, and the providers sometimes are being dragged kicking and screaming into being expected to do this thing that wasn't their idea. And in others, it's the other way around. The service themselves are saying, fantastic, at last, yep, this is what we're doing. Finally, we can start, calling a spade a spade, as we say. And they're trying to convince the commissioners what they're doing has a kind of background and a theory and a kind of, it's part of something much bigger than just a few sort of clever ideas that they're doing in one particular place. So I think it is very variable. How we get commissioners hooked, I'm not too sure about this term, hooked. How we get them enthused, perhaps. Well, there's two or three different issues. On the one hand, we need, I think, a network of commissioners talking to each other, learning from each other. In the health service, you've got primary care commissioner groups, and there is a network. Website, I think a newsletter even of primary care commissioners learning from, exchanging information. I don't believe there's anything remotely like that in social services and local authority or in the sort of housing and homelessness division. To my mind, there's a real need for it. We can meet some...
Have your...
What's that?
I've lost the sound. Can you hear me?
I hear you. Do you want to hum for a bit just to make sure? No, I've lost you. I can hear me, but then I could already. Okay, let's ask the others if you are hearing us. Let's use the Twitter feed to see who can hear who. Thanks, Alex. Well, okay, I'll tell you what, until such time as Ray joins us, I could just try, as they say in jazz circles, vamping till ready. I could just keep on talking. Can I come back for a moment to one of Karinda Marley's question? What's the difference between PI and mental health? It's an awful lot easier to do this when there actually is a discussion going on. But the difference between PI and mental health, well, mental health, there's a difference between PI and mental health services. Here's Ray.
Hello? Can you hear me?
You're back.
Yeah. There we go. Go out and come in again. They always say switch it off and switch it on again.
Unplug it at the wall.
So sorry, Robin. Apologies for the technical glitch there. But you were saying about commissioners. Molly is.
Yeah, well, whilst you were away, I was just trying to sort of cover the silence by trying to answer the question about what's the difference between PI and mental health.
Yep.
So I suppose I might as well carry on with that, really, unless
yeah.
What I was saying is that psychologically informed environment, we use the word primarily about homelessness services. It actually, the same thinking doesn't just apply to homelessness services. It's just that's where it started. That's where we started trying to sort of describe what it was that's going on. The same principles, the same underlying ideas apply in a whole range, from an older person's care home to a adolescence unit or a mental health service or whatever. You could apply the same thinking in a lot of different settings. So if you say what's the difference between a psychologically informed environment and a mental health service, well, mental health services call themselves mental health. They say what they're doing is psychology or psychotherapy or treatment.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of the people you find in homelessness services don't think they want that. They don't want that. They're not sure they need it. Many of them are despairing of ever being able to effectively change their lives and change themselves at all. They've kind of given up. Yep. And certainly many of them have been let down by authorities, care services. I mean, one of my colleagues talks about the example which people are very wary of being groomed, because their experience of people paying attention to them has often been that this is just a way of kind of forming a relationship of trust in order to then abuse it. I mean, really, a shocking insight that that I'm really grateful to him for pointing out. So a lot of the people that homelessness services work with do not see themselves as wanting or needing personal change. It's us who think maybe they could benefit. So a lot of in one of the psychology theories calls this the pre-contemplative stage. Is when people aren't really ready to start questioning or thinking about their own experience at all. They're just trying to sort of, cope with the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune. Yeah. So how do homelessness services in that case help somebody who either doesn't think they need help or doesn't think they can be helped? How do you help them? Yep. You certainly don't do it by saying we are a mental health service. Yeah. But other than that difference between PI and psychologically involved services and mental health services, they're all just words. It's like saying, what's the difference between red and orange? Well, spectrum. Yeah, it's a bit like there's a range of ideas within even talking therapies, and then there's this approach, like there's the systemic family therapy approach and open dialogue, which in England, the 6 NHS pilots are piloting this open dialogue approach, which would resist diagnosing people, give people low levels of medication, and particularly looking at psychosis. But it's an example, I suppose, that there's not one size fits all. We've had a really good description feedback about equine therapy in our service. One of our clients has been having equine therapy, which is about engaging with horses in a therapeutic way to help. And it's not something I know a lot about. But I read a great blog by her yesterday, just describing her experience of how that had helped her. So I'm using them as examples that when people think about what's helpful about overcoming the traumas of the past and being therapeutic, it doesn't have to be. It's great if there's really good things to share from talking therapies, but I don't want people to be mindful that there might be things from your culture, there might be narrative approaches, that there's a whole set of ideas that could be helpful, which staff in frontline homeless services could be bringing these ideas in and learning from psychological theories and talking therapies. But there's a whole host of things out there. There's spirituality, there's faith approaches, there's philosophical approaches. There's loads of things that could help people. So I just wanted to kind of share that in terms of a PI could introduce many different kinds of ideas to help people to be more therapeutic. Horticultural therapy, what they sometimes call green care. Green care, yeah. Really exciting stuff. Yeah, particularly it seems with substance abuse. There seems to be something around working with plants that is particularly helpful or effective. Have we lost you again? Can you hear me? Oh, yeah, no. Yeah, I've heard of some really positive green therapy approaches, and there's something about, I think, the metaphor of growth and seeing things grow, and about that we need those different ingredients in our recovery. I've certainly found that myself in my own recovery, is that there's many different things can help you to grow and recover. I'm also trying to look at the question that Alex has asked. The principle of PI is about an ongoing journey. Is there a danger of it being implemented in a tokenistic way, which is a good question. Yeah, absolutely. But I think that's true of anything positive, that it can be, misunderstood and sort of done as a thin veneer to cover exactly what was happening before, just given a new name. Incidentally, I regard an ongoing journey as one of the essentials of a PI. We didn't actually spell that out in the original. And I suppose it was implied, it was kind of in there, but we didn't actually spell it out in the way we did talk about staff training and support and evidence generating practice and having a cycle, the big five. Yep. Again, you have to remember that when we wrote that, when we came up with the term PI and we wrote a couple of guidance documents, it was still very early days, starting to tease out how we do this, how we improve this. Yep. Think about the built environment. The built environment, we didn't include the grown environment. Yeah. We didn't include horticultural stuff and so on. And would you have liked the journey?
would you have liked the journey metaphor to have been more clearly kind of articulated?
Yeah, maybe. I wouldn't want to make it one of the key elements necessarily, because it's so, as with reflective practice, we also said the golden road to all of this is taking the time, recognizing the need to take time to think about what happened and learn from the experience as a group, as a service.
Yep.
And again, that was kind of, it ran through the whole thing. Like the name in it, like Skegness runs.
Oh yeah, rock. I don't know if you have that in the other parts of the world of people tuning in from America and Japan, but maybe you do have rock everywhere. But a word going right the way through. So maybe reflective practice is kind of some things like. I particularly find the journey metaphor helpful when talking about pi, which avoids Alex's point about tokenism. So sometimes people feel this is a very valuable way to improve services and integrate health and housing. But when they hear the pi, there's a temptation to want to say, "Oh, we do pi," or "We've got pi," or to say, and by instead of an on-off switch, we were talking to John Liddell yesterday. I had a really good chat with him from Public Health England, and it was helpful to say, rather than a switch that's on or off, pi is a journey that the service can go on, as well as the individual client can go on a journey of recovery. The service can go on a journey where you might be halfway along the journey anyway, or you might be just starting, and then that helps people to think, well, actually, although we might be doing 2 or 3 of these things, we could get better at them, and we could introduce 2 of the points that we've never done before. And the journey, I think, metaphor helps services to relax a bit, not have to say, "Oh, we are a pi," but more, we'd like to go on the journey.
And I think, in a way, that was a danger, a risk that was intrinsic in the idea of commissioners suddenly starting to say, "Yeah, it's brilliant. We want everybody to be a pi." So some people were being kind of asked, "Are you or are you not?" As if it was an either-or thing. And another way of looking at this is to say, I think that being a pi or becoming a pi is a long jump rather than a high jump. With a high jump, you set the bar at a certain level and you either jump it or you don't, in which case you either are or aren't. With a long jump, it's all about personal best. You go as far as you can. Next time you try and go a little bit further, and so on. To me, a pi is a long jump, not a high jump.
Yep, that's a good way to think about it. Definitely. What I'm thinking, Robin, is we're going to try and experiment with trying to keep this fairly short and just to half an hour. Again, we're on a learning curve, so we'll reflect. We'll do some reflective practice about how it's helpful and the way this works. So we might draw it to a close in, say, 2 or 3 minutes, if that's okay with you.
We're going to run again next week, but on the Friday rather than on the Thursday. Is that right?
That's right. So I think next Friday at 12 o'clock, and we can tweet about this, and we can, if people want to follow, I'm dialogical_Ray on Twitter and Periscope and Blab, and we'll tweet about it, we'll email it out, and it'll be 12 o'clock on Friday, and hopefully for the next 3 Fridays then, so it's a consistent time you could tell people to tune in, and we're going to try and run about 5 after Christmas as well, and then we may start to, as we learn, we'll invite some guests on to speak maybe about the things we spoke about, and have some specific topics around maybe commissioning or the Fulfilling Lives projects and things. So that's really worth looking forward to.
When we've got 4 seats like this, 4 possible places, it'd be really interesting to have a dialogue, a discussion between 4 people.
Yeah, definitely.
I'm not the expert on this, I just describe what I see.
And I'd like to be just the host, where I can, although I've run 3 set up 3 blabs, 3 pies. I'd rather be the host, where I can bring people into the 4 bits and just facilitate the conversation, because people have loads of good experience to share. And so I think people just need to get over the anxiety about the new technology, about how, if you've not been on Twitter, you kind of need to work out how to get onto Twitter to give you credentials to come onto Blab, and that will help people. So if anybody wants to email me, my work's email is ray.middleton@fulfillinglives-ng.org.uk. I've put it at the beginning of the Twitter feed if you're watching the Blab replay. And we'll send out, and we'll hopefully over time we'll build up a community of practice around Pi, Blab system change, and have some exciting speakers on to kind of share ideas, because the idea is to help each other out and to validate lots of good practice around the place. Oh, Alex was said she would join, and maybe by next week she can join. But we need to. I think Alex needs to just work out the camera. How to the technical side of things. But it's great with Blab. You can have a go. My sound kind of went off and came on again. It's kind of relaxed in terms of as hosting live TV shows goes. It can go a bit wrong, allow things to fail, and work it out. We can learn things as we go along. So, Robin, any final thoughts before we finish today's chat? I wanted to thank everyone for joining.
Thoroughly enjoyable, really useful. The only thing I would say is that next time, let's try and make it more of a discussion amongst us all. I mean, okay, I've done a lot of this. I've got a lot of ideas. I've got a lot to say, but I also learn more from hearing about what other people are doing. So that would be my preference. Let's move to this 4-way and 6 and 8 and 10-way dialogue.
Very much so, and I think it'll just take a little bit of time for people to build up the confidence to come live on air, or you can comment. But it does help to have a pair of earphones if you do want to come on, and just you can go into Blabs and check it out to work out the technology works. Or even on an iPhone, you've got those little ear pods, which is earphones with a little speaker halfway down the wire. If you plug them in, it helps with the audio. And then do feel you can watch, but hopefully next time we can get some more people on and share ideas about improving homeless services through Pi. So thank you everyone who's commented. Go on, Robin.
I could certainly mention this and invite particular people but I think it would help if there was a particular topic, because most of the kind of people that I'm working with aren't necessarily interested in learning to use the technology.
Yeah. It's the content.
What they want is to come to something where the technology is kind of sorted out, and we've done that before them, and then they want to get involved in the actual topics, the discussion. So here we've got sort of a mixture of the two.
Yeah.
But I think we could maybe start specifying 1 or 2 particular topics that we'll address one week.
Yeah, definitely, and we'll do that. I think that's the problem of early adopters of any new technology is the pain of getting onto the technology, but it's exciting and it could really help. So maybe next week, I wonder if it's too early to say next week we could do it on the Pi guidance, because we need to check it out. So we'll decide what the topic's going to be, and then we'll try and invite people on, and we'll have more of a discussion next time. So thank you very much. I'm going to draw it to a close. Thank you for everyone that's joined from around the world as well. See you next time, Friday, 12 o'clock. Be there.
Yep. See you, folks.
See you.
See you.
See you.
Or not see you.